Nick and Sophie had been married for 2 years. They met one unforgettable night at a live concert. Each had come with their own group of friends, but as fate would have it, they ended up standing near each other in the crowd. There was an instant connection. From the moment they started talking, it felt like they'd known each other for years. Conversation flowed effortlessly, and by the end of the night, they'd exchanged numbers and made vague plans to meet again. But vague turned into something very real. They saw each other the next day, and then the day after that. Before long, they were inseparable. Nick had always been the type to know what he wanted. By the time he met Sophie, he already had his life on track. He owned his apartment, had a stable job, and was ready to settle down. What had eluded him until then was someone he truly clicked with. Someone who didn't just check boxes but felt like home. That's what Sophie became to him. Their connection was instant and comforting, like slipping into a conversation with an old friend. Things had been going well, or so Nick thought. Then, one afternoon, Nick got a call from his old friend Eric. The two had known each other since college, and though life had taken them down different paths, they still stayed in touch. Eric asked if they could meet up with the guys. It had been a while. When Nick pressed a little, Eric hesitated, then admitted he'd finalized his divorce after 10 long years of marriage. He didn't get into details over the phone, but Nick could tell Eric wasn't okay. That weekend, Nick and their mutual friends met up at Eric's place. He tried to act upbeat, cracking jokes and pretending like things were normal. But the strain in his eyes, the weariness in his voice, it was all too clear. Eventually, he broke down and told them the truth. His wife had been cheating on him for the last 6 months. And worse, she hadn't even seemed sorry. "She didn't care about me or the kids," Eric said, his voice cracking. "How can someone be so heartless?" They stayed with him well into the evening, offering what support they could. But even after Nick got home, he couldn't shake the sadness in Eric's voice. A couple of days later, Eric texted Nick a message that simply read, "Check out this horror. Are they all like this?" Attached was a link to an online forum. Curious, and admittedly a bit wary, Nick clicked. It was a message board where anonymous users, mostly women, were discussing infidelity in alarming detail. What shocked Nick wasn't just that people cheated. It was the way they talked about it, as if it were a hobby. Some posts described secret affairs that had been going on for years. Others admitted they were only staying with their husbands until they were sure the affair partner was a better option. There were threads filled with cold, calculated advice. How to lie convincingly, how to erase digital traces, how to use girls' nights or fake business trips as cover. The tone was flippant, even gleeful. Nick's stomach churned. He felt like he'd fallen into some alternate reality. One post in particular made his blood run cold. A woman described how she'd gone on a romantic getaway with her coworker under the guise of a business trip. She bragged about how her husband never suspected a thing, even thanking her friends for covering for her. Nick's mind instantly flashed to Sophie. A few months ago, she'd suddenly become very enthusiastic about meeting up with her girlfriends. Before that, such get-togethers had been rare. They all had families, demanding jobs, limited time. But now, it seemed like every week there was a new birthday party, girls' dinner, or spontaneous coffee catch-up. Then there was that work trip in February. Her company rarely sent people anywhere anymore, and yet she'd been gone for 4 days. He wasn't a paranoid guy by nature, but something about that post felt too familiar. And then, a small detail made his breath catch: the forum user's screen name. It reminded him of an old username Sophie used years ago when they first started chatting online. "No way," he whispered, slamming the laptop shut. "I'm overthinking this." He got up, grabbed a snack and tried to distract himself, but the next day the unease was still there. "Okay," he muttered. "I'll just check. For peace of mind." He knew Sophie's friends would never betray her confidence. They'd close ranks. But the business trip seemed like the weakest link. Nick remembered that an old classmate, Madison, worked at the same company as Sophie. They weren't close, but this wasn't a casual favor. He picked up the phone and called her. "Hey, Maddie. I know this is awkward, but I really need a favor. Remember when Sophie went on that work trip in February? Can you tell me where she went? Who else was on that trip? Madison hesitated. That's kind of specific, Nick. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, he said. Just please. Can you check? Few hours later she called back. Okay, I looked into it, she said quietly. Sophie didn't go on any work trip. In fact, she took unpaid leave those days. There were no company events, no travel. Unless she has a second job nobody knows about. Nick's stomach twisted. Did anyone else take time off then? He asked. She was silent for a moment. Yeah, Adam did. You know him, right? He's in her department. Nick's hand trembled. Thanks, Maddie. You've helped more than you know. The next day, Nick and Sophie were scheduled to visit her sister, who was recovering from surgery. On the way there, Sophie was distracted and worried, and in her rush, she left her phone on the passenger seat when she got out. Nick waited until he was sure she wouldn't double back, then picked up the phone. He unlocked it and searched her contacts. He found Adam. He tapped the number. Hey baby, everything okay? Said a male voice. Nick took a breath. This is Sophie's husband. The silence was instant and heavy. I know what's going on, Nick said coldly. If you ever come near her again, we're going to have a serious problem. You might want to think about whether a few cheap thrills are worth your job. I know people at your company. People who won't look kindly on this. Adam stammered. I understand. I'm sorry, man. I didn't know. Nick hung up. When Sophie returned to the car, she tugged on the handle, surprised to find it locked. Hey babe, let me in, she said, laughing. Nick rolled the window down just a crack. Got anything to tell me about that business trip of yours? He asked coolly. Sophie froze. I thought if you could share it online with strangers, maybe you could share it with me too, Nick said, his voice thick with sarcasm. I know about you and Adam. Don't bother coming home. I'll pack your things and send them to your parents. Here. He held out her phone through the window. Use it to call yourself a ride. Sophie's demeanor changed in a flash, from confusion to rage. She screamed, pounded on the car, called him every name she could think of. In a final pathetic attempt to hurt him, she shouted, Fine. I'll go live with Adam. He's better in bed anyway. Nick just laughed and drove off. A few hours later, Sophie showed up at Adam's place. Or tried to. He wouldn't let her in. Over the intercom, he told her it was over. Nick's warning had clearly sunk in. Suddenly, Sophie had no husband, no boyfriend, and nowhere to go. Humiliated, she called her parents, claiming she and Nick had a minor argument and she just needed a place to cool off. Her parents reluctantly let her stay. Her mother, initially sympathetic, said she was sure they'd reconcile. But then Nick arrived, calmly dropped off Sophie's belongings at their door, and told her mother the truth. Her daughter had been caught cheating. Her mother's face turned pale. The warmth vanished instantly. Nick wasted no time filing for divorce. Weeks later, he met up with Eric and thanked him. That link had opened his eyes. Unlike Eric, he and Sophie didn't have kids. No custody battles, no long entanglements. And by warning Adam, Nick had burned Sophie's bridge with her affair partner too. She had no fallback plan. Maybe now, Nick thought, she'd finally learn. You can't build a happy life on someone else's heartbreak.